The Karathi Syndicate had built Nexus Prime to be impenetrable. The massive space moon station orbited a forgotten gas giant in the Vega 7 system, far from the busy trade lanes and prying eyes of the Galactic Alliance. It wasn't that the Syndicate feared oversight. Their patents and permits were all properly registered. But when you're housing the most dangerous creatures in the known universe, privacy becomes a commodity worth more than platinum. Kira Tran stood at the observation window, her third-level maintenance badge reflecting the strobing emergency lights. 3 months ago, the most notorious capture in Syndicate history had arrived, the Void Stalker. It had taken 12 of the galaxy's most elite hunters to cage it, and 6 of them hadn't returned. The creature was worth more than the combined GDP of 17 planets, both for research purposes and bragging rights. "Maintenance level 3 shouldn't even be allowed on this floor," a voice said behind her. Kira turned to see the sneering face of Dr. Veltran, head of xenobiology. His pristine white lab coat seemed to repel the flickering red light, remaining unnaturally bright. "I was assigned to check the ecological support systems," Kira replied, keeping her voice even. "Section 12 through 47. Veltran's mouth twitched. "That would include this enclosure, I suppose. Well, be quick about it. We have Karathi executives arriving next week." Kira nodded and turned back to her diagnostic panel. The Void Stalker's enclosure required the most meticulous balance: atmosphere, gravity, light spectrum, and 17 other variables she had memorized during the long transport from her previous assignment on the ice moons of Cantor Prime. Through the reinforced observation window, she could see only darkness at first. The creature preferred shadow, hence its name. When the monitoring lights cycled to infrared, she caught glimpses of movement, something massive shifting in the artificial cavern beyond. Then it happened. As she adjusted the nitrogen ratios, a massive form surged forward from the darkness, stopping just short of the observation barrier. The Void Stalker was nothing like the holovids. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, its body defied categorization, part insectoid, part reptilian, with elements that reminded Kira of deep-sea creatures from old Earth. Its skin, if you could call it that, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was the intelligence in its multiple eyes that froze Kira in place. Not animal intelligence. Something else entirely. The creature placed what might generously be called a foot against the transparent barrier. Kira should have run. Should have triggered the emergency protocols. Instead, she raised her hand and placed it against the barrier, mirroring the Void Stalker's position. "Fascinating," Dr. Zixval's voice broke the silence. The Taurian xenobiologist had entered without Kira noticing. His 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme interest among his species. "It's never approached the barrier before," Zixval continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Not even when the hunters delivered it." Kira lowered her hand quickly. "I was just checking the atmospheric levels." "No, no," Zixval said, waving all 3 of his arms excitedly. "Continue. This is the first interactive behavior we've recorded." The Void Stalker remained still, its foot, or appendage, still pressed against the barrier exactly where Kira's hand had been. "Dr. Veltran would say it's an aggressive display," Zixval said. "But I'm not convinced. The positioning is all wrong for threat behavior." Kira glanced at her diagnostic panel. "The oxygen levels are slightly elevated. I should adjust them." Yes, do your work," Zixval said, already activating his recording devices. "I'll just observe." As Kira adjusted the settings, the Void Stalker moved in perfect sync with her, tracking her movements with unnerving precision. When she stepped left, it shifted left. When she raised her other hand to the control panel, it raised another appendage. "Dr. Zixval," Kira said quietly, "is this normal behavior?" The Taurian was frantically taking notes. "Normal? There is no normal for a Void Stalker. You're the first human it's shown any interest in. The first anything, Really? When Kira finished her maintenance checks and prepared to leave, the creature followed her movement to the door, tracking her until she disappeared from view. Most curious, she heard Zixval mutter behind her. Most curious indeed. 3 days later, Kira's maintenance rotation brought her back to the high-security section. This time, Dr. Veltran was waiting with a group of stern-faced security personnel. "Maintenance worker Tran," he said, his voice clipped. "Before you begin your assigned tasks, I'd like to show you something." He gestured to a view screen, where security footage showed Kira's previous visit, particularly her interaction with the Void Stalker. "Dr. Zixval seems to think the creature was attempting communication," Veltran said. "I, however, believe this is pareidolia, humans seeing patterns where none exist. The creature is merely displaying territorial behavior." One of the security officers, a scarred veteran named Vexar, who had been part of the Void Stalker's capture team, grunted. "That thing doesn't communicate. It hunts. It kills. It adapts. That's why it took 12 of us to cage it." 11, corrected another hunter, a wiry woman named Nyx. "Thien and Zix just provided the bait." Veltran ignored their banter. "Nevertheless, we've decided to use this opportunity for research. You will continue your maintenance routine under observation. If the creature continues to react, we may gain valuable insights." Kira nodded, uncomfortable with the scrutiny but unwilling to refuse. Her job at Nexus Prime had taken years to secure. Maintaining ecological systems for captured specimens paid 3 times her previous salary, enough to support her aging parents back on the colony world of New Saigon. As she approached the Void Stalker's enclosure, she felt a strange sensation, a pressure at the base of her skull, like someone was watching her. The creature was already at the barrier, waiting, its body completely still, except for the gentle undulation of what appeared to be respiratory organs. "Begin your maintenance routine," Veltran instructed, from a safe distance behind her. Kira activated her diagnostic panel and started the usual checks. The Void Stalker mirrored her every movement with uncanny precision. "It's anticipating her actions now," Zixval noted excitedly. "Look at the response time. It's moving before she does." "Coincidence," Veltran dismissed. "Or perhaps it's detecting micro-movements we can't perceive." The pressure in Kira's skull intensified. Without thinking, she adjusted the oxygen levels down by 2%, outside the standard protocol. The Void Stalker immediately relaxed, its coloration shifting slightly. "What did you just do?" Veltran demanded, checking his monitors. I'm not sure," Kira admitted. "It seemed uncomfortable. The oxygen felt too high." "Felt?" Veltran's voice rose an octave. "These levels are set according to rigorous xenobiological standards." Zixval was already recalibrating his instruments. "Fascinating. The creature's respiration rate has indeed normalized. How did you know?" Kira shook her head. I just knew." What she couldn't explain was the sense of gratitude she now felt, a sensation that wasn't her own. Over the next 2 weeks, Kira's routine expanded to include other high-security enclosures. To everyone's surprise, specimens that had previously been hostile or unresponsive began to show similar reactions to her presence. The acid spitters ceased their constant territorial displays. The swarm minds, collective intelligences that typically formed aggressive patterns, created symmetrical, almost artistic configurations when she entered their observation area. "It's as if they recognize her," Zixval theorized during a research meeting that Kira had been unexpectedly invited to attend. "Nonsense," Veltran countered. "These are unrelated species from different galaxies. There's no evolutionary basis for such recognition." "Perhaps it's not evolutionary," suggested a quantum biologist named Dr. Oren. "Perhaps it's something else entirely." Nyx, who had become a reluctant consultant after the hunters had delivered their quarry, leaned forward. I've tracked prey across 17 systems. Sometimes you develop a sense for them. And sometimes, she paused, glancing at Kira, they develop a sense for you. That's not science, Veltron snapped. That's hunter superstition. Perhaps, Nyx shrugged, her scarred hands playing with a small blade. But there's a reason hunters survive, and scientists don't. When these things get loose. The meeting ended with a new protocol. Kira would continue her maintenance duties, but expand them to include optimizing the enclosure environments based on her observations. It was an unprecedented level of autonomy for a Level 3 technician, and it came with discreet monitoring of everything she did. What the scientists didn't know was that Kira had begun to hear them, the creatures, not with words, but with sensations, images, and emotions that weren't her own. The Voidstalker was the strongest, a constant presence whenever she was in the high-security wing. It didn't communicate with language. Instead, it shared impressions, the feel of cosmic dust against skin that absorbed light, the joy of moving between stars without a vessel, the hunger for energies no human could perceive. And it was learning about her too. During her 6th visit, Kira found that the environmental controls had been adjusted, not by other staff, but somehow by the creature itself. The temperature had been raised precisely to human comfort levels, though the change was subtle enough that the automatic systems hadn't flagged it. "How did you do that?" she whispered when the scientists weren't watching. The impression she received in return was complex, something about fields and forces and manipulation of energy at a quantum level. The Voidstalker didn't just adapt to environments, it could, in limited ways, adapt environments to itself. "You shouldn't be able to affect systems outside your enclosure," Kira murmured. The feeling that came back was almost like amusement, coupled with images of barriers that weren't really barriers at all. Kira began keeping a private log, documenting changes that weren't in the official reports. How the Voidstalker would sometimes demonstrate abilities that should have been impossible inside its containment field. How it seemed to know when she was coming, even before she entered the high-security wing. How it had begun to show her things, memories of worlds she couldn't possibly recognize, yet somehow did. The connection was growing stronger, and with it came knowledge that both thrilled and terrified her. The Voidstalker hadn't been captured by accident. It had allowed itself to be taken, curious about the strange little creatures that thought themselves masters of the void. It had been studying humanity long before humanity had discovered it. Then came the day everything changed. Nexus Prime was due for a scheduled system maintenance, coinciding with a stellar storm that would require additional power to the shield generators. It was also the day the Karathi executives had chosen for their inspection, a perfect moment to showcase their most valuable acquisition. Kira had been assigned to monitor the ecological systems during the maintenance, ensuring no disruptions affected the specimens. She was in the central control hub when the first alarm sounded. "Power fluctuation in Sector 7, a technician called out. "Shield generators drawing more than expected." "The storm's intensity has increased," another reported. "Radiation levels rising." Then came the critical error. System update initiating in all sectors. "What? No!" The chief engineer's face paled. "That was scheduled for after the maintenance cycle." For exactly 17 seconds. Every system on Nexus Prime went into reset mode. 17 seconds where the containment fields flickered, where security protocols paused, where everything that kept the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy imprisoned, momentarily, ceased to function. 17 seconds was all the Voidstalker needed. The alarms changed from cautionary yellow to emergency red. Security doors slammed shut throughout the station. Announcement systems blared automated warnings. Containment breach in Sector 12. Containment breach in Sector 13. Multiple containment breaches detected. Kira felt it before she saw the security feeds. A surge of triumph, of freedom, of anticipation. The Void Stalker hadn't just escaped its own enclosure. It had, somehow, released hundreds of other specimens as well. "This is impossible!" Veltran was shouting into his communicator. "The systems are isolated. They can't be breached simultaneously." But they had been. The security feeds showed chaos erupting throughout the station, acid spitters melting through corridor walls, swarm mines flowing like liquid metal through ventilation systems. And somewhere in the darkness, moving faster than the cameras could track, the Void Stalker. "Initiate lethal containment protocols," ordered the head of security, a grim-faced woman whose hand never left her pulse rifle. "Authorization Omega-7. "Wait!" Kira stepped forward before she could stop herself. "You'll kill them all!" "That's the point," the security chief replied coldly. "Better to lose the specimens than the station. And the executives are arriving in 20 minutes. Kira felt panic rising. Not just her own, but a wave of it from the creatures throughout the station. They didn't want to die. They wanted something else. Something she could almost grasp. "Give me 10 minutes, she heard herself say. "I can get them back to containment." Veltran laughed harshly. "A maintenance worker? This isn't a malfunction in the waste recycling system, Tran. These are the deadliest creatures we've ever encountered." "Then, what do you have to lose by giving me 10 minutes?" Kira countered. "If I fail, your lethal protocols will still be there." Dr. Zixval, who had been analyzing the security feeds, spoke up. "The specimens aren't attacking personnel. They're moving with purpose, but not aggression." 9 minutes, the security chief said, checking her chronometer. Not 1 second more. Kira didn't waste time arguing. She moved to the central communication system and, without asking permission, activated the station-wide announcement channel. But instead of speaking, she closed her eyes and concentrated on the presence she had come to know, the Void Stalker, and through it, all the others. She projected feelings rather than words. Calm, safety, cooperation. She thought of environments perfectly tailored to each species, of respect rather than imprisonment, of understanding rather than fear. The response was immediate and overwhelming, a flood of sensations from hundreds of different minds, all converging on a single concept: trust. Opening her eyes, Kira spoke into the communication system. "This is Kira Tran, Ecological Systems Maintenance. All specimens, please return to designated habitats. New protocols are being established for mutual cooperation." The security chief stared at her, as if she had lost her mind. "You think they understand English?" "No," Kira replied. "They understand intent." On the security feeds, something remarkable began to happen. The acid spitters, which had been melting through Deck 7, turned and moved in formation toward their enclosure. The swarm mines, which had spread throughout the ventilation system, began to coalesce and flow back toward their containment area. "This is unprecedented," Zixval whispered, his 4 eyes widening in astonishment. "It's a coincidence," Veltran insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "They've expended energy and are returning to their known territories." But it wasn't just a few specimens. Throughout Nexus Prime, creatures that had escaped were voluntarily returning to containment, not to their original enclosures, but to new ones that Kira was designating through the station's environmental control system. "She's redistributing them," Zixval realized, watching Kira's rapid inputs. "Optimizing their habitats based on compatibility." The station's automated systems struggled to keep up with her commands, but the results were undeniable. Creatures that should have been mortal enemies were accepting adjacent enclosures. Species that required vastly different environments were being arranged in patterns that somehow satisfied their needs while conserving the station's resources. All except one. The Void Stalker was nowhere on the security feeds. 8 minutes, the security chief announced. "Where's the primary specimen?" As if in answer, the doors to the control hub slid open. Standing in the entrance, its massive form nearly filling the frame, was the Void Stalker. Weapons were drawn instantly. The security team formed a protective line in front of the scientists. Veltran was shouting for the lethal protocols to be activated immediately. But Kira stepped forward, moving between the security team and the creature. "No," she said, her voice steady. "It's not here to harm anyone." The Voidstalker moved into the control hub with a fluid grace that belied its size. Security personnel backed away, their weapons still raised but uncertainty clear in their stance. "Kira," Zixval said cautiously, "what is it doing?" The pressure in Kira's mind had become a clear presence, not invasive, but collaborative. She understood now what the Voidstalker wanted, what all the creatures wanted. "They're not specimens," she said. "They're ambassadors. They came here to learn about us, to understand humanity." The Voidstalker allowed itself to be captured to facilitate this exchange. "That's absurd," Veltran sputtered. "They're animals, valuable, dangerous animals." The Voidstalker turned its multiple eyes toward Veltran, and the scientist abruptly fell silent, his face draining of color. "They're far more than animals," Kira continued. "And they've been learning our systems, our technologies, our weaknesses. Today was a demonstration." "A demonstration of what?" the security chief demanded. "That containment is a cooperative arrangement," Kira replied. "They stay contained because they choose to, not because we can force them to." As if to emphasize her point, the Voidstalker moved to a control panel and, with surprising delicacy, manipulated the interface. The main view screen changed to show the approaching Karathi executive shuttle. 5 minutes until executive arrival, the automated system announced. The security chief's expression hardened. "If what you're saying is true, then these creatures pose an even greater threat than we thought. They need to be eliminated." "Or," Kira countered, "they represent the greatest opportunity for interspecies cooperation in history. The Karathi Syndicate wouldn't just have research subjects, they'd have partners." The tension in the control hub was broken by the arrival of the remaining hunters, Nyx, Vexar, and 2 others whose names Kira didn't know. They entered with weapons drawn, assessing the situation with the cold calculation of experienced predators. "Stand down," Nyx said after a moment, lowering her weapon. "I've seen that look before." "What look?" Vexar demanded, his rifle still aimed at the Voidstalker. "The look of something that could kill us all, but has decided not to," Nyx replied. "For now." The next few minutes passed in a surreal calm. The Voidstalker remained near Kira, occasionally manipulating controls to assist in redistributing the other creatures. Security personnel maintained their positions, but didn't interfere. The scientists watched in a mixture of fear, disbelief, and, in Zixval's case, unrestrained excitement. When the executive shuttle docked, Nexus Prime had been transformed. What had been a prison was now something else entirely. A diplomatic station where humans and the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy had reached an uneasy but functioning détente. "What do we tell the executives?" Veltran asked, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine concern. "The truth," Kira said simply. "That Nexus Prime has evolved beyond its original purpose." The Karathi executives were not pleased, at least not initially. Led by Syndicate Director Marik, they had expected to see the most advanced containment facility in the galaxy. Instead, they found themselves face to face with the Voidstalker, free from any physical restraints, with Kira Tran as its interpreter. "This is a catastrophic security breach," Director Merrick declared, his cybernetic eye whirring as it analyzed the creature before him. "The potential liability alone is offset by the potential gain," interrupted Executor Leon, the only woman among the executives. Her calculating gaze moved from the Voidstalker to Kira. "If what Dr. Zixval's report suggests is true, we're witnessing first contact with multiple new intelligences. Intelligences that, until today, were considered merely dangerous animals," added another executive, a data specialist whose name badge identified him as Analyst Julin. The Voidstalker moved, causing several of the executive's bodyguards to raise their weapons. But it was only shifting to allow a better view of the holographic display Kira had activated, showing the new arrangement of creatures throughout Nexus Prime, now organized in what she described as collaborative containment. "The specimens," Kira began. "Ambassadors," corrected Zixval, who had thrown his considerable scientific reputation behind Kira's interpretation of events. "The ambassadors," Kira continued, "have agreed to remain on Nexus Prime under certain conditions. They will participate in research that doesn't harm them. They will share knowledge of their species and abilities. But they will not be treated as property." "And if we refuse these terms?" Director Merrick asked, his tone dangerously quiet. The Voidstalker's presence in Kira's mind sharpened, conveying a clear message. She didn't soften it. "Then they leave. All of them. And they take with them everything they've learned about our defenses, our weaknesses, and our technologies." The implied threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Every person present understood what it meant. Creatures that could escape Nexus Prime could potentially threaten entire worlds. "Executor." Leon broke the silence with a sharp laugh. "Well played," she said, addressing not Kira, but the Voidstalker directly. "You've created a situation where cooperation is the only rational choice." The creature inclined its massive head in what could only be interpreted as acknowledgement. "I propose a 6-month trial period," Leon continued, ignoring Director Merrick's sputtering objections. "We implement this collaborative containment approach. If it proves successful, we expand it. If not..." She left the alternative unspoken. The pressure in Kira's mind changed, conveying agreement with a hint of amusement. The Voidstalker had expected exactly this outcome. "There's one more condition," Kira added. "I stay on as Senior Facility Coordinator. The ambassadors trust me to represent their interests." "A maintenance worker." Director Merrick's cybernetic eye focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. "With no scientific background or executive training? Yet, she's the only one who can communicate with them," Zixval pointed out. "And the only one they've shown any interest in cooperating with." "Executor," Leon nodded decisively. "Granted. With appropriate support staff and resources, of course." 6 months later, Nexus Prime had been transformed beyond recognition. What had been sterile containment cells were now tailored habitats. What had been observation windows were now communication interfaces. Scientists no longer studied the creatures. They learned from them. And at the center of it all was Kira Tran, moving through the station with the Voidstalker as her constant companion. The creature had chosen to remain outside containment, serving as a liaison between humans and the other ambassadors. Together, they had established protocols that benefited both sides. The creatures shared knowledge of worlds and phenomena humans had never encountered, while the humans provided a gathering place for species that would otherwise never have met. "The syndicate's stock value has tripled," Executor Leon commented during her inspection at the 6-month mark. "Turns out, interspecies diplomacy is more profitable than specimen containment. And considerably less hazardous to employee health," added Zixval, who had been appointed Chief Xenobiological Liaison, a position created specifically for the new Nexus Prime. Even Dr. Veltran had adapted, albeit reluctantly. His expertise in creating controlled environments had proven valuable in designing the new habitats. He would never admit that Kira had been right, but he had stopped objecting to her leadership. The hunters had mostly moved on to other contracts, though Nix occasionally returned as a consultant on new arrivals. "Never thought I'd be escorting creatures here willingly," she remarked during one such visit. Times change. For Kira, the transformation went deeper than the station itself. The connection she shared with the Voidstalker had expanded to include other creatures, creating a network of understanding that transcended traditional communication. She had become something new, not quite human in the conventional sense, but a bridge between worlds. "Was this always your plan?" she asked the Voidstalker one quiet moment, standing at the viewport overlooking the gas giant that Nexus Prime orbited. The impression she received was complex, a mixture of intention and adaptation, of plans made and opportunities seized. The Voidstalker had recognized something in her from their first meeting, a capacity for connection that most humans lacked. It had been drawn to that potential, just as she had been drawn to its alien intelligence. Together, they had rewritten the relationship between humans and the creatures they had once feared, not through force or containment, but through something much more powerful: understanding. As they stood watching the swirling storms of the gas giant below, Kira felt a new sensation from the Voidstalker: anticipation. This was just the beginning. There were more creatures out there, more intelligences waiting to be discovered, and Nexus Prime would be ready to welcome them, not as specimens to be studied, but as ambassadors to be respected. The station's communication system chimed, announcing the arrival of a new transport. Another creature was coming, one that even the Voidstalker regarded with a mixture of respect and caution. "Ready?" Kira asked, though she already knew the answer. The Voidstalker moved toward the docking bay, and she followed, just as she had that first day when she'd adjusted the oxygen levels on instinct. Then, she had been a maintenance worker, forgettable and overlooked. Now, she was a facilitator of something revolutionary. It had taken 12 hunters to cage the apex predator, but it had taken only one human, willing to see beyond fear, to truly understand it. And in that understanding, both had found something neither had expected: a future where barriers existed only by mutual consent. And the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy chose cooperation over conflict. As they reached the docking bay, the Voidstalker paused, turning its multiple eyes toward her. The message it shared wasn't in words, but Kira understood it perfectly. Some cages are made of energy fields and reinforced walls. Others are made of ignorance and fear. Both can be opened, if you know how. And together, they had found the key.